without any further ado, let's please hear from Grant Hauschild, who's running for the Minnesota State Senate District 3.
Thanks a lot, Lacey. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is a really great crowd. I have to say from the onset, I think this is the third time that I was scheduled to speak to the Ely Tuesday group. And I'm sure at some point you all were like, is this guy going to show up? Does this guy actually, want to be a state senator and do the work? So just know that there was some kid sickness going on, some rescheduling needs, and we always plan to be here. And I just really appreciate your guys' patience with that. So, well, I am just thrilled to be running for this state Senate race. For those of you, I know I look around the crowd and I see a lot of folks that I've had the chance to have one-to-one conversations with, that I've had the chance to really sit down and talk about the issues. In addition to that, a lot of you have helped me knocking on doors, talking to voters about the important issues that matter to us. And I can't tell you how much that means to me. Having folks taking their time, treasure, sweat, tears to do the work that really matters. I got involved in politics when I was really young. I was about 13 or 14 years old. And, I don't come from a political family. So I didn't have somebody, dragging me to campaign events. I didn't have a dad or a mom who was super interested in policy, none of that. And so when I look back at those times, I remember distinctly asking my mom when I was 14 to drive me down to the labor hall so that I could knock doors and make phone calls for candidates. I didn't have a driver's license, so she had to drive me down to the office. And I think she thought I had grown a second head. She's like, you want to take you where? I don't even know what a labor hall is, first and foremost. And you want to knock doors for other candidates. Do you know the issues? Do you know what they're talking about? So, I think back to that moment and what it was that inspired me to get involved. And I realized that it's really, really simple. Here in the Midwest, we all of us in this room, go out of our way to help our friends, our neighbors, but not just that, we go out of our way to help complete strangers. And, my theory is we don't just do that to make ourselves feel good inside, although it does make us feel good. We do it because we know that life is that much easier when we have each other's back. As a Democrat, as a DFLer, the reason that I got involved all those years ago and the reason I am who I am and the belief that I have is because I know that when we look out for one another, it makes all of our lives better. My wife and I, we have a 6-month-old. Her name is Isla, and I'd love to show you pictures here in a little bit because she's adorable. But we were able to take some modest paid time off to be with her during those critical months. But I don't want that for just my family. Every family and every baby deserves to have their loved ones, their guardian, and their parents with them during those critical development months. We all know that the North Shore mine is currently idle, that there are hundreds of workers that are unemployed. Those workers getting extended unemployment, it cures my life. It makes my life better knowing that those workers have the unemployment insurance they need to get by during those months when they don't have the salary that they need to provide for their family. We as Democrats should all be proud of the safety net that we have provided and that we advocate for these workers. Yeah, I'm sorry. She's going to help guide me because sometimes I walk around a little bit when I'm talking. I'm obviously not a woman, but I damn well know that when a woman has reproductive freedom, that is something that we all need to fight for because my wife, my kids, and everybody that we yes. And that's something that we have to be proud of, whether you're a man or woman or so. That is really, really critical. In my day job, I run a hospital foundation. In that job, I raise money for patients and families that perhaps can't afford certain aspects of their care, hotel stays, food, lodging, all of those things. Recently, we opened a Ronald McDonald House for the Northland, which serves Iron Range families who have NICU babies or kids with cancer. And what I've been telling people, and I firmly believe this, we need to make my job less necessary. I need to work myself out of a job. We should not have to create GoFundMe pages or fundraising to ensure that people get the care that they deserve and need to survive, especially young children, but everybody. So that's really what I'm fighting for. I want to serve and work on healthcare issues where we can try to make affordability more accessible for everyone in our healthcare sphere. We've seen recently drug price reform, price cap on Medicare and Medicaid. Those are things that are happening nationally, but there are a lot of things that we can do at the state level to ensure that we're protecting those affordability issues with our healthcare. Those are a lot of the issues that I'm running on. But obviously, we all know that there are elephants in this room. What I like to tell people is that a good politician is like a burger, grilled on both sides. So, I'm really excited to dig in and talk about mining, to talk about the environment. I am a solid believer in climate change. We need a state senator that believes in climate change. We need a state senator that's going to fight to zero out CO2 emissions. I've had meetings with the likes of Minnesota Power and other entities to talk about how do we move that transition? What can the state government alongside the federal government do to ensure that we're getting that transition and we're doing it well and effectively? I'm somebody that believes in our government. I'm a DFLer after all. I believe in the public servants whose job it is to evaluate projects, to evaluate our industry, and to ensure and protect our environment. That's who I am. And if I, lose faith in our public servant's ability to do that, then we're in a much more difficult position than I think we should be as folks that believe and fund and support our public servants in our state government. So I'm really excited to answer questions and dig in on those issues too. I'm a father, like I said. I have a 2-year-old Henry and Isla is 6-month-old. I really got into this race because I want to leave Minnesota better off than we found it. It's been pushed by the other side. I didn't grow up in this particular place. Not that it's anybody's choice where they grow up, but you know what is a choice? Where you raise your kid. And I chose the Northland for a reason. I chose to raise my family here. My wife is an advanced practitioner serving patients all across the Northland. We love this place. And we love this place because it's the most beautiful part of Minnesota and because it's the most beautiful part, honestly, of our entire country. And so we are thrilled to be here, and we're damn proud to be here. And we're not going to let anybody tell us otherwise. So that's really my message on that front. And I wouldn't move here for the beauty of this area if I didn't believe in protecting the environment, in protecting the boundary waters, and in protecting everything that we cherish on here. I firmly believe that in my heart. And so just know that that's the place that I'm coming from. With that, I am happy to open it up for questions. I don't know, Lacey, if you want me to call on people, but happy to do that. Yeah. Can you tell me your name too? I know we met, but.
Yeah, sure. Could you comment on the status of Senator Marty's healthcare reform? I know it has not been able to pass the Senate because of the one majority.
Yeah.
Could you see what may happen now in the next legislative session?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a perfect point and why the importance of our district matters so much. The majority. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So her question was, what is the status of Senator, I believe it's Marty. I don't know exactly where he represents, but somewhere in the Twin Cities, I believe. What is the status of his healthcare bill in the state Senate? And so my point was, this is one example among many why the state Senate is so important. District 3 is ground zero for the majority in the state Senate. And as I'm sure many of you know, the DFL right now does not control the state Senate. So when we're talking about things like Senator Marty's healthcare bill and any other bill in the state Senate, we are not able to move forward on many of the legislative priorities we have as DFL, despite winning majority of votes in the state, despite having the governor in every statewide office, despite controlling the state house. And so District 3 is critical. Now, to your question, I think we definitely need to move on health insurance reform. I have always said that I think a public option competing with private insurance is a very, very smart move. I would also be very interested in looking at Senator Marty's bill. I haven't, to be completely honest, I'm not, super up on exactly what it says or what it would do. But I think it's more of a move towards a single payer healthcare reform type bill. I will say one of my main concerns with that is not necessarily the policy. My concern is the potential burden of doing it as a state. I do think that there are costs associated with moving to a single payer healthcare system in just the state model that could be burdensome. And that's, they found that in Massachusetts and in Vermont when they've tried to move forward on those bills. I mean, Vermont of all places, the most liberal state in the country, we couldn't move forward on a state version of a single payer healthcare system. And I think that's because there are some sunken costs that are too burdensome for a state to take on. So that's a long way of saying I'm supportive of looking into that. I'm supportive of finding ways for us to better call out insurance companies that are rising costs. But I want to make sure that we're smart about it and that we're working with our federal delegation on what that might look like as well.
I'll bring the mic around for questions.
Thank you.
Anybody? Stephen Gold, state of Minnesota is always seem to have a multi-billion-dollar tax surplus, and there was like $9.2 billion
Yep.
this year. What's the possibility that you'll support not taxing Social Security? Seeing as though we're only one of the 13 states that still do that.
Can you say your name? Mike, nice to see you again. So this is, I would say, maybe the second biggest issue that I hear about on the doors. Whenever I am out knocking, and I have knocked on thousands of doors, people feel like Social Security was a tax on them and that it's a benefit that they deserve. And I think that's right. I do not think that we should be double taxing Social Security. You're right that we're one of 13 states that does that, and I think that's ridiculous. We have a $9.2 billion surplus that is projected to be $12 billion. And so I would very strongly be a top advocate as a state senator for eliminating the tax on Social Security income. Never give me the right.
Frederica Bustrick. I've been trying to articulate grants and questions. I have two of them, and one of them, I'll do the other one later perhaps. Your opponent claims to be for common sense. And when I look at the common sense, I think of that being a bloody flat ball. That it's just shooting out whatever will get people excited to get elected. Versus what I see from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that you are guided kind of by two things. One I'll call a North Star. Because I'm thinking of, you have a philosophy, your life, what you've done, that guides you. So that when you articulate things, you're actually looking up there, what's your philosophy? And what you say ties in with that. And I know some people are upset you don't use the right verbiage and stuff. But what I see is that it's grounded in that North Star, that positive stuff. Like Michelle Obama said, when they go low, I go high. The other thing that I see from you is that you are grounded in the community. And that's your rural development background, I believe, that you studied. So you understand us and what's going on in the rural community where we are. And so I'm just curious how you feel about that. Are you a common sense flat ball person? Or are you kind of grounded in those philosophies, well, grounded, if you will, on the ground, but also your general philosophy, where you're going and with us?
So I will try to synopsisize Frederica's comment. I think she is asking, do I see myself more as a common sense person, or do I see myself more from a philosophical, higher level thought, maybe, I guess you could say, when I think about policy? And while I very much appreciate Frederica's comments, and Frederica and I know one another fairly well, I think in order to be a representative of the people, you have to understand both those things. There's something in government called a trustee versus a representative. And I won't go into a political science lesson here, but just very quickly, the trustee version is that you trust your intellect, your own ideas, your research, your education to make the decisions you think are best for the people. Whereas a representative form of being a representative is you literally just listen to what the majority of the people in your district believe, and then you just vote that way. You don't put your own biases or education or thoughts into that equation. Neither of those are the right way to do it. You obviously need to be educated. You need to do your research. People elect you to be their trustee, to be the person that's going to be in those hearings, that's going to hear from a broad range of people on these issues. But at the end of the day, you have to work within a democracy. You have to work for what the majority of people firmly believe and elect you. Otherwise, you're not going to win elections. That's the very premise of our democracy. So, I would say, yeah, I do have some theories. I described them to you of why, I got involved and why I am a DFLer in my heart. But I also understand, the need to represent a broad range of people and talk to everyone and have the tough conversations that are needed to be a true representative of the people. I worked as U.S. Senator Heitkamp political director. He was the number 50 most moderate U.S. senator in the country, next to Senator Manchin. I have been in rooms with people who really hated us and people, that were pretty neutral on us because of our unique position of being a deciding vote on a lot of big issues. And that, I would imagine, is going to be the kind of senator that I'll be if I'm elected. And I hope that you guys can trust me to always have an open door, to always be thoughtful, to always meet and talk and learn alongside you. Politics is not static. It's not concrete. It doesn't solidify and stay the same. And so we always need to be thoughtful and learning as a representative and as a
You quoted someone within the state, and you were close, but you need to quote it completely. We all do better. We all do better. If you follow that mantra, you should be elected. That's my.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's obviously Paul Wellstone, and somebody that I look up to dearly, much like I'm sure many of us in this room, a true representative of the people. And somebody, one thing I want to talk about is conviction politics. It's something that Paul Wellstone also thought of. It's this idea that you can always listen to everybody. You always need to have people challenging your ideas, but at your core, you have to have conviction. Because if you're just a leaf in the wind and floating around, making up your beliefs as you go, or telling different people two different things, you're never going to be reelected. You're never going to be a true senator. And Paul Wellstone understood that. He was a conviction politics kind of guy, and I, firmly fall into that camp too. A lot of us in this room, and we all know there's those elephants in the room that I've already alluded to. We're not going to agree on everything. I'm just not going to be that guy that that follows the DFL party line. And, you know, I think that is important, and I wish our opponents were that way, but I don't think they are. You know, I think what we need in this Senate district is an independent minded person who can step into Tom Bach's shoes. Whether you love him or hate him, I don't care, but the guy delivered for our district and for our region, and I respect the hell out of that. And I'm ready to take those shoes, put them on, and sprint on day one. And I'm not gonna listen to party leadership. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna follow the line. I'll work with them. I'll work with anybody. But I'm not gonna be at the back of the line following along. I'm gonna be leading from day one. And that's what we need up here in the north.
You have something, Lisa?
I was first to Zoom question.
Mhm.
Benjamin Wolf, tuning in virtually, asks, could you please speak more regarding your views on the Boundary Water Canoe Area Wilderness and copper sulfide mine?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the elevator, right? And I appreciate Mr. Wolf's comment. So what he asked was, what are my views on the boundary waters and on the copper nickel mining projects in our state? You know, and this is what I'll tell you and I'll reiterate. You know, I wouldn't have moved to the Northland into this area if I didn't believe protecting the very areas that make this place the most special place in our state, were not protected. So, you know, at my core, at my conviction, that is something that I believe. I would never plan to be elected a state senator and be the guy that's going to taint the boundary waters. That is never something that I would look forward to. When it comes to the copper nickel mining projects in our state, I firmly believe in the public servant and in the regulatory environment that we have created as a state to evaluate these projects. I, as somebody who is not a mining expert, who's not an environmental scientist, who is not a public servant who studied up to my master's or PhD level education on these issues, feel prepared to tell the public servant how they should evaluate these projects. We as a state have to be a place where industry have a chance. We have to. We cannot tell groups that are trying to create jobs for hardworking Minnesotans that they don't have a shot. And so when we talk about the federal, withdrawal that is being proposed, it is my opinion that I would prefer the state have the chance to evaluate that mine plan, that the state regulators and our state process be able to be followed. You know, I have worked in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the very agency that is part of this process. I worked as a President Obama political appointee. So you know where I come from. You know the people that I believe in, the people that I've worked with. But I also believe that this is something that we need to have evaluated at the state level and trust the people that do that work. Now, that's not to say that the federal government shouldn't, you know, be able to do a environmental review, provide guidance, do the things that they are experienced to be able to do. But where I'm coming from is, I think the project needs to have a fair shot. And if it's shown that it can't pass muster, that it can't do what Twin Metals says that they can do, then it shouldn't go through. But I'm gonna be an advocate for letting that process. Yeah, Becky.
You knew I was gonna
Yeah.
have a follow-up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a weak answer.
Yep.
With Twin Metals, it does not have any right to the public minerals that it seeks. With Twin Metals, it has no right to state land, which it needs for its tailings basin. So right now, there is no mine plan. There is nothing to evaluate. Now, we did see during the Trump administration, a lot of unlawful activities, including renewal of expired mineral leases found to be unlawful since canceled. And during that time, Twin Metals did submit a plan. All mine plans actually must by law be reviewed by both the federal and the state government, because you have federal regulations, state regulations. Calling that was a joint federal state EIS, and then there's state permitting and federal permitting, Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera. So it really isn't just a state process. In Twin Meadows situation, because there was a separate state review and a separate federal review of a mine plan that Twin Meadows submitted in December of 2019. After looking at it for 2 years, both the state and the federal government rejected it. And they rejected it because Twin Meadows didn't meet the most basic legal requirements. One, that it have a right to the public minerals that was seeking to mine. And two, that it have a right to use state land to dump its toxic tailings. So both the state and the federal government have said there's no mine plan here, period. So when you say you support a review of it, there is nothing to review. It's been before the state and the federal government and it's been rejected. It's over. So under those circumstances, it's a little puzzling to say I support that because it's now in the past, rejected by both the state and the federal government. The process that is before us was first started in 2016, which is the federal process for federal lands. State doesn't have anything to do with it. And that is it the right place for copper mining? So in the United States, we own 640 million acres of minerals. And regularly, the federal government, including under Trump, does mineral withdrawal reviews to look at places that are valuable and vulnerable and make a decision based on science. So that's the legal process that's going on right now. It has nothing to do with a mine plan. There is no existing mine plan. And so under those circumstances, Grant, knowing that this is the legal process and followed 4 times by the Trump administration, people are all engaged. Up till now, 580,000 people have so far commented over time on this project, 98% saying this is the wrong place for mining. Science supports that. Under those circumstances, do you support the current process that the federal government is engaged in to determine if public lands in the headwaters of the boundary waters is the right place or the wrong place for copper nickel mining?
No, thank you, Becky. And I know Becky does a lot of work, well, more than a lot of work in this area. So I won't pretend to be, to be up on everything that she's, aware of. Yeah, she's smart. You're right. So what I will say is this, and I've said this from the beginning. I do not want our state industry and our jobs for hardworking Minnesotans to be determined through a political football game. And when I say that, and I know we talk about the Trump administration and what they did, my perspective is that what precedent has been set now is that we are going to have a withdrawal period and then a reinstatement period, back and forth across our federal government every time somebody is elected. And it could be a Democratic administration, hypothetically. Hypothetically, there's a scenario where that plays out as well, or vice versa. And so what I don't want is for that political football to be played, because we've seen that is what happens. That is literally what happens. And we know that if somebody else is elected, that it's very possible for these to be reinstated. So with that political game in mind, I'm putting on my black and white striped shirt as a state senator and saying, this is nonsense. I do not like that these jobs, this industry, and frankly, critical minerals that we need to advance the green economy, regardless of where it is, it should be evaluated. It should be looked at by our state regulators. And again, if the Boundary Waters project is considered not appropriate compared to, let's say, the Talon project, then so be it. But I want that to be evaluated. I do not want a mineral withdrawal and reinstatement back and forth. I do not think that is good for anybody. It sets a precedent that this is political, not regular. And that is my big.
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, I think we all in this room think that a political football is wrong. No question about it. And there's a lot more at stake than just the mining industry. It's everybody in this room everybody that lives in the North Country, that enjoys the boundary waters, which is a national treasure. Nobody deserves that. That political football was Donald Trump. He is the one, his corrupt and unlawful administration did that. Hopefully, it's an anomaly. And what I urge you, and so you're creating this false solution, saying that somebody should evaluate a mine plan that doesn't exist, and that'll be the end of it. It's not even a viable option. In 2016, Governor Dayton said, Twin Metals, I'm saying no for a mine in the headwaters of the boundary waters. That was a decision. In 2016, the Forest Service said no to copper nickel mine in the headwaters of the boundary waters. It was a decision. It was certainty. What happened there was unlawful behavior in the Trump administration. $1 million lobby campaign by Antofagasta, purchase of a mansion for Jared Navanka by the owner of Antofagasta, and ultimately unlawful reversal. Yes, it's political football directly from the White House. That's wrong. But the solution for that, I would urge you to consider, is not to say we should evaluate something that's not viable and doesn't exist. It's to recognize the wrongful behavior came from Donald Trump. And we all unite together in making sure that nobody like him gets near federal office again. That we elect good people interested in good policy, fact, science, and the legal process, and go forward from here, not use what Donald Trump did to come up with a solution that really doesn't exist and would create more uncertainty and confusion. That would be my encouragement for you.
Thank you, Becky.
You know, you said you don't have a law degree or an environmental science degree, but we will get you one.
I would love to go to law school. I really would.
Benny's got a question back.
So I would like to add a comment on the mining, and I did have another question too, but one of the things that we hear frequently from pro copper mining people is trust the agencies. We have the agencies that are best in the country, best in the world. But within the last few years, it was found out and uncovered that the Minneapolis or the Minnesota Environment Protection Organization was hiding information. They suppressed information, and the federal pollution control had to come in and take over. So that kind of statement just doesn't hold a lot of water. Agencies are infected by politics, and those things do happen. So I would just want you to keep that in mind, and just consideration of what these issues are.
No, thank you for that. And I'll try to, it wasn't really a question, but nonetheless, I think it's worthy of discussion. So the question was, I said that I trust public servants and the regulators whose job it is to evaluate these projects. Your comment was that through some investigatory method, it was determined that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency perhaps withheld some comments and other items from the public process. And certainly we should not have universal unilateral trust in bureaucracy. That's obviously we should. I've worked in those places. However, what I maybe meant to say is that I err on the side of public servants whose job and expertise it is to evaluate these projects. Now, as a state senator, certainly we would have the legislative authority to have hearings, to call in agency leaders. The governor has the ability to appoint many leaders of agencies that do this work and oversee those public servants doing this work. So I would be very, very engaged and involved in ensuring that our state agencies are run with an ethical guidance from our elected governments elected by the people. So certainly there are examples of when things have gone haywire. I'm glad the federal government had the wherewithal to, and maybe it wasn't the federal government, but, the entities involved that discovered that discrepancy and made that more public. I think it's always good that we have journalists, uh, I forget what it's called when you have an entity in the government that does the audits, but those type of audit entities that look into those things. That's why we have those positions and it's why we do that. But what I'm saying is, I do in my core believe those public servants have a duty to perform their job and expect them to do that.
I'm sorry, this is a comment.
Yeah, please.
Also, I do have the degree in environmental engineering and spent 40 years in wastewater, water, solid waste, and industrial waste treatment, design, and disposal. And when you get to that point where you may have to make a decision, I would only offer one comment: shit happens.
Yeah.
And I've seen it over and over, and I've seen it from industry who really did want to provide good outcomes for their community. And there's human error. Plants don't last 500 years. Maintenance people make mistakes. And in copper nickel mining, I don't think you can afford an unintended error, mistake, and discharge, because you can't fix it. Also, I did have a question. I am a reformed Republican from Nebraska. And when I grew up, I knew a lot of intelligent Republicans, people who would say I'm socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and we could have a discussion. Now, when you see the news and you hear Republicans talk, it's yay or nay, yes or no, black and white. In the background, with your experience, are there discussions where these people actually exchange ideas? And I mean, they may say, I can't go that way because I lose my seat, but are people talking about ways to resolve issues or not?
Can I just, so clarifying question, what do you, these people, as in when I'm out talking to people in general in the district, or what?
Elected officials.
When you work for
Yeah, so your question is, in the government, among elected officials, in this political gridlock world that we live in, are there genuine people trying to solve problems? That
Among Republicans.
among Republicans in particular? Unequivocally, yes. Unequivocally, yes. And I say that not liking many elected officials at the national level on both sides. But there are a core group of people, and I've seen it because Senator Heitkamp, when I was her political director, was among them, actually trying to dig in and solve issues. Where you run into problems is not the rank and file members trying to solve problems. Where you run into issues are the leadership. We have a toxic system right now where, frankly, Senator McConnell, and while I think she has accomplished a lot, Nancy Pelosi, has been there a long time. And you have these leaders who are entrenched in these state districts that have no reason to figure out compromise. They're not incentivized to do it. And so, we saw when President Obama was elected, Mitch McConnell made the comment that my number one priority is ensuring that President Obama is a one-term president. That is not the way that you run the greatest country in the world as a legislative leader. And so, I would blame the leadership, but there are some really great Republicans. Senator Corker comes to mind from Tennessee. He's no longer there, of course. Senator Heitkamp is a great one. Senator Tester in Montana is a really great legislator. I can handpick a couple, but yeah, there's some really great senators, Republicans and Democrats doing good things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
I guess I have to remind Becky that it was in the last few days of President Obama's term that he decided to pull the leases on Twin Meadows. And then when Trump got into office, started the review process, the 2-year study, which went for about 22 months because there was nothing more to review on their project. Biden then turned around and did the same thing. So it has been a political football that going back and forth.
Nancy, I have a question. Same thing. After this discussion, will you correct your statements online about my position?
Their positions on,
Right.
I had not heard any of them until recently.
Oh, okay. Well, now you're turn I've heard it, so it'll be good to correct the record.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, for many years, I have advocated that all people come to the table, the environmentalists come to the table to work with the mining companies to ensure that the mining can move forward and be safe for the area. But that has not been done. It is just, no, we don't want to have the mining. There are 2 gold mines in Canada in the very same water pit that have been in operation. And we also have Eagle Mine in up north, upper Michigan, that is just miles away from Lake Superior mining without impact to the area. And Flammable was also with operated. So to say that it can't be done, it would be better to have everybody at the table to try to work to see that this project could move forward, rather than to just say, no, it can't.
Did you hear my comments? I said something to that effect.
So Grant, you've been serving on the Town City Council, and I'm curious about what you got engaged in there and were involved in, maybe what drew you to run in the first place, and also how you think it has prepared you for state office.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for that. And the reason it's such a good question is because as I described, I've worked in a federal agency, I've worked in the US Senate, I've been on the political side, on the policy side. My time as a city councilor has honestly been my favorite job. And I think part of the reason is Hermantown is a small town, it's about 10,000 people. And when you walk outside and you see the projects that you were talking about, when you are a vote that perhaps breaks a tie to do something good in your community, that feels really good. And when you're raising your kids, my life has changed in the last 3 years, having a son and a daughter, living in the very community where I'm serving as an elected official. And that really changes your perspective. And I know that's cliche, but it's so true. We opened a YMCA in Hermantown that I was directly involved in on the private side, and my kids go to daycare there now. I work out there and live a healthy lifestyle from that facility. That was made possible because local groups of people came together, government, public entities, a nonprofit, and donors to make it possible. So that's one thing that I'm really proud of. Another thing we did is kind of an interesting idea, which was we had a need for a construction of a sewer trunk, literally a sewer, not exciting at all, right? Very costly, but not exciting at all. What we did is we passed that sewer trunk, paid the money, but then we thought, why don't we use this as an opportunity to build a trail on top? We're going to be doing all that excavation. We're going to be digging. We're going to be creating this poop pipe. So let's build a trail so that our community is connected. One thing about Hermantown is it used to be a rural township and now it's a city. And so we needed to find ways to bring the community together. And a trail through the center of the town was a really unique way to do that. The last thing I'll say is we want to connect that trail to the Munger State Trail. So you think through a sewer trunk, we added 2 miles of paved trail. But if we can get state sales tax approval and some bonding, which I was working with Senator Bach on, we can connect our entire trail system through Proctor through a separate referendum and connect the Munger State Trail, adding 160 miles of paved trail from our community. So those are the innovative things that local governments can do with public-private partnerships that I'm really proud of. And I think that's the unique perspective I'll bring as a state senator, is not just my federal experience, not just my US Senate experience, which will come in handy when we need to talk to Amy Klobuchar or Tina Smith, or Congressman Stauber. But in addition to that, now I have this local government experience that I can bring to the table to connect all the dots. And I think that's really, really important in an elected official.
I was just gonna say, along these lines, Ely is, the world is in an unusual state of affairs right now where we have jobs but no people. Basic question is, what do you think is going on? And how do you say this? We need housing,
Right.
but we need people to fill the jobs that are available out there. Restaurants are closed,
Right.
3 days a week, and all of a sudden, there's nobody showing up to be the dishwasher and be the, and we have those jobs that were once filled with many people are now going unfilled.
So thank you for that. The question was, how do we fill the jobs and get the people up here to the Northland to fill many of the, whether it's in the tourism industry, the retail and service industry, but also kind of across the board. I know at Essentia Health, we have need for CNAs, for nurses, for all sorts of people that I work with every day to provide the care we need for people. So this is such a complex issue, but there's many things that we need to do. First is to identify one of the things that has caused this. And I think what we are living through right now, in part because of COVID, is not an industrial revolution, but a digital revolution. I think there are a lot of people my age, and I know because I work from home on a computer, who have the opportunity to work for companies in Peru, in Florida, in wherever it is. And people are living at home. They're living where they want to live, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But we are no longer an economy that can just place a box store and the people will come because they need the job. And so a lot of people my age are not filling the baby boomer generation that is retiring in droves and perhaps retiring early because of COVID to fill many of those jobs. The second thing, and you spotted it, housing is out of control. I'm one of the lucky millennials that was able to buy a home before prices skyrocketed, but I have many friends who would like to live not just in northern Minnesota, but many of the most beautiful places in the country, and the homes are just not available. And so we have to find ways to not just have the government fund housing, because we've seen that model doesn't always work while it does have a place. What we need is these public-private partnerships where the government can incentivize housing, where we can try to figure out, how do we maintain good, strong regulations that protect us, but also look at where are there burdens that maybe are unnecessary in the construction industry to make sure that we're able to build the housing that we need at a price that makes sense. Lastly, particularly in the Northland, I think one thing we need is a state senator who's going to be on the capital investment committee and who's going to know how to do this work to direct money up to the Northland for important things like sewer trunks, like roads, like bridges, because what that does is it lessens the burden on local property tax. And the other issue that I hear on the doors all the time is skyrocketing property tax increases in St. Louis County in particular. And so the more money that I can steal from St. Paul and get up here means the less burden that there will be on local property owners and hopefully a reduction in health.
Minnesota unemployment is at 1.8.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that. This is the lowest in the nation. The lowest in the United States. Minnesota is at 1.8 unemployment. You don't understand why you don't have people? Because our unemployment is so low. I mean, it's a real crisis. It's not just in this state. It's across the nation. And you're right. People are staying home. I've got a neighbor. She works for Delta. She does reservations to her home. I mean, and it's a great gig for her because she can watch her kids and still do her job.
Can you go to her house to get a ticket?
Yeah. So this actually brings up another issue. So he was commenting about the 1.8% unemployment rate, which, the one silver lining is that is the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the country of any state in the nation. So Minnesotans should be proud that we're hardworking people that are filling these jobs. But one other issue in addition to ones I mentioned is we need, visas expanded. We need people who want to work to be able to come here to fill the jobs at Lucid, to fill the jobs here in Healy, to fill the jobs all over our country and state, because why wouldn't we welcome hardworking people? That's crazy, Yeah.
You look around. No, this is an older group. Every white face is here. I mean, not to be fingers to anybody, but this community, well over 65. I mean, the demographic is there. And for you to go out and wash dishes or wait on the tables, you're not gonna do that. So if you wonder why these places are closed, it's because our demographic is really high at 65 and over.
Yep.
So.
Grant,
Oh,
Mike, I know.
yeah.
A strong supporter of public school system, which I think is one of the miracles that's made our country great.
Yeah.
And yet it's really under attack, funding, all kinds of taking away support. What can you do to help strengthen our valuable public school system?
No, yeah, thank you for that. The question was, education is a critical component to our country's success. And what can we do to help foster growth and success within our education system? Education is really critical to me. I wasn't a great high school student. No, I wasn't terrible. Don't worry. But I wasn't fantastic. And I got to college and I found professors and teachers who cared about my success, who found my passion for public service. And I thrived. I became a Harry Truman Scholar, one of the 50 of the nation that year, following Harry Truman's legacy. So I got damn good at education at that point. And I firmly believe that is the number one thing that separates America from the rest of the world, at least, in our history. And in particular, and one of the reasons I chose to raise my family in Minnesota is because of the Minnesota Miracle and the equation that was created in the 1970s to fund education in an equitable way from state coffers to help in rural and greater Minnesota communities bridge the gap in educational attainment. We've lost some of that. The Minnesota Miracle, some would argue, doesn't exist anymore. That's not to say public education is bad. I think it's still very strong in Minnesota, but we have our work cut out. In the state legislature this last session, there was a deal on the table that was signed by the governor, by the speaker, Portman, and by Senate Republican Majority Leader Jeremy Miller that would have provided historic tax cuts, eliminated Social Security income tax, but it would have also re-implemented a sort of quasi-Minnesota Miracle in education. Do you know why Senator Jeremy Miller walked away from that deal? Because of education. He walked away from that. He signed the agreement. We got the tax cuts. We got what the Republicans wanted. He just couldn't stomach the idea that we would fully fund our education system and support some of our healthcare reforms necessary to reduce costs. So that tells you a lot about the dynamics that are happening in our state legislature. If I'm elected as a state senator and we have the majority, education will be one of my top issues. I will be there to make sure that we're re-implementing a Minnesota Miracle because I believe in it and we have the money, as we talked about. I think it's a sad state of affairs that we're walking away from that. And this is another reason why I need all your votes. Because this race is going to come down to, I think, less than 100 votes. I think it's going to be the tightest district in the state. We know that President Biden and Donald Trump came within 30 votes of each other in this district. 30 votes. That's how many people I talked to in a night of door knocking. And so, you know, if you want the Minnesota Miracle again, if you want reproductive freedom and women's health choices protected, if you want the senator who is thoughtful and thinking about climate change and addressing and protecting our environment, and if you want a state senator who's going to make sure that the DFL maintains this labor stronghold in District 3, then I need your vote. And we're going to work hard on a lot of these issues. So I appreciate that. All right.
Good way to wrap it up is. Yeah.
How would one contribute to your campaign?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I would greatly appreciate your money and time and support. You can go to my website at grantformn.com. There's a donate button right there on the main screen and you can donate there. You know, that's another advantage. When we have the money we need to get our message out, that'll help us win too. So appreciate anything you're willing to do.
What